Hello and welcome to another video. Today I will react to geography now. Oh no, sorry. I'm so used to saying that I react to geography now. Now I react to the front. I'm not sure what this channel is about, but yeah, we have a comment. Someone wrote to me and suggested to me watching this video. Canadian change when they hear the word war. I searched for this video and I found it, and I will now react to it. I hope you all enjoy it. I am a bit skeptical because I read here about from the horrifying to the heroic. So I'm not sure about this channel. Maybe he's great. I have not watched a video from him, so I give him a chance and give the video a chance. I hope he will be also okay with me reacting to it. Yeah, I have not seen anything from him before, so let's see how he is and how the video is. Yeah, there's nothing heroic about any war. I would think maybe some things which some people can do something heroic when they help each other, when two soldiers lay down their weapons and stop fighting. And it was maybe I don't know if the heroic is the right word, but it was amazing when the soldiers in the First World War in this first year at Christmas laid down the weapon and stopped fighting. It was not great when they started again to fight, but it was great when they stopped. So some things can maybe be heroic. I'm not sure. Let's watch the video to find out what this video is about.
Sorry, not sorry. While Canadians are nowadays subject to the stereotype of hockey-loving, maple syrup-chugging, overly polite potheads, their wartime stereotypes in the First and Second World Wars had their enemies trembling in their boots and making a hot mess in their trousers. It's as if when the Canadians hear the word war, their insatiable desire for maple syrup and Canadian beer turns into an insatiable desire for blood. In saying that, however, they didn't always rush enemy positions with bayonets, meat cleavers and spiked clubs, but were some of the most well-trained and formidable soldiers on any front in any war. In this video, we're going to explore Canadian wartime reputation, keeping our scope focused on World War II and the heroic feats of individual Canadian soldiers therein.
So we will focus on the World Wars, okay. I know about that at the beaches of when they landed the Normandy D-Day. No, it was the D-Day. I know that the Canadian had one beach, the American had one beach, and the British. So and I know that the Americans suffered the most casualties at their beach, but I'm not sure what happened with the Canadian. But maybe we'll find out. Hi, I was looking for the webcam. Now I found it.
To get the puck sliding, let's move our scope quickly to the First World War, in which the Canadians laid the groundwork for their reputation as shock troopers. Mostly, the troops of the Canadian Corps were known for their savage raids on enemy trenches and their unwritten take no prisoner and kill the wounded policies. Locked in a stalemate in opposing trenches, the Canadians devised all manner of strategies and weaponry to flip the chessboard upside down and clean up the enemy pieces. Cutting through barbed wire, they crept upon them in the cover of night with painted faces, launching either savage, unforeshadowed raids or perking up their ears and eavesdropping on enemy plans. In said raids, the Canadians gorged their bayonets with blood and made good use of improvised melee weapons, paying little attention to attempts at surrender and skewering bandaged and unarmed men just the same as men on their feet with rifles. They even
It sounds very cruel to kill people which don't have weapon, and so take no prisoners, and this kind of does not seem very. I mean, war is terrible in all its facets, but when someone do not fight, he or she should also not be killed.
Concocted an alchemist's shelf of homebrew explosives, like pipe bombs and jam jars loaded with nails and gunpowder. I think it's a safe bet to say that at least one grenade is made with a maple syrup jar. There are also tales of Canadian troops using temporary truces, like on Christmas Day, as a chance to catch their enemy with his stockings on, sending him grenades instead of Christmas ham, and bullets through the brain instead of season's greetings. Now, it could be argued that Canadians were acting out of vengeance, but couldn't that argument be used to justify most atrocities in most wars? Canadian Lieutenant R.C. Germain's letter home to his parents makes the revenge excuse about as clear as the sap from a freshly tapped maple tree.
You could also, of course, argue that in war times there are no rules. So whether a soldier now has a weapon or not, they get killed because it's war. But how can a war be ended if not through some kind of? At some point a war has to end, and at some point also the fightings must stop. So when does a war end? When does a war end? When the soldiers stop fighting at the end of the day. Of course, this happens mostly through negotiations or something like this, but on the ground, so on the battlefield, the war ends when the soldiers stop fighting. And this is what should happen. This is what the soldiers should do on the ground. If they can, they should stop fighting. In whatever war, you can take any war in the world in the history of mankind. They should stop fighting. And of course, they are told that the enemy is evil and that the enemy must be destroyed. But as a pacifist, I'm a pacifist. I don't like wars, and I don't think that anyone really likes wars. So, yeah, but this is nothing against the Canadian. It just seems a bit cruel to me. But at the end of the day, war is cruel, and we should just stop wars.
After losing half of my company there, we rushed them, and they had the nerve to throw up their hands and cry "Kamerad." All the "Kamerad" they got was a foot of cold steel, while I blew their brains out with my revolver. Despite being a little stab-happy with enemy soldiers, Canadian troops were known for being quite, as we contemporary folk have come to expect, polite to civilian populations. Before we have a look at Canadian reputation in World War II and some of its stories, it might pay to know about Canada's involvement in the war. Canada waited until the 10th of September 1939 to declare war in Germany because it didn't want to follow Britain like a Commonwealth sheep. It took Canada until the 11th of June 1940 to declare war on Italy and the 7th of December 1941 to declare it on Japan. Overall, about 10% of Canada's population fought for her and the Allies. This amounted to around 1,100,000 Canadians serving in the Canadian Army, the Royal Canadian Navy, and the Royal Canadian Air Force. Of this 1,100,000, the majority were volunteers. Canadians fought in almost every theatre of World War II, notably in the defence of the United Kingdom, the Battle of Hong Kong, the Dieppe Raid, the invasions of Sicily and Italy, the Normandy landings and the liberation.
Let me read this. Defense of the United Kingdom. Yeah, of course, there were air battles. Okay, and the Normandy landings, which I also mentioned at the beginning, which I knew about.
Of France and the liberation of Belgium and the Netherlands. The Canadian Navy escorted Allied ships across the Atlantic and maintained a high presence in the Pacific Ocean, and pilots from the Canadian Air Force flew under the wing of the British Royal Air Force. German submarines sunk Canadian naval and merchant vessels in the water of Canada and Newfoundland and attacked the loading pier at Bell Island. And the Japanese also attacked a lighthouse on Vancouver Island, though little else occurred in Canadian waters or on mainland Canada. Of the military operations in which Canadians were involved, their ferocity and inventiveness stood out in the Battle of Ortona, the Normandy landings, and the liberation of Belgium and the Netherlands. Through the medieval streets of Ortona, Italy, the Canadians and Germans engaged in brutal room-to-room, hand-to-hand fighting, with the Germans eventually having to withdraw. Here, the Canadians coined the tactic mouse holding, which is basically blowing holes in buildings to allow the passage of infantry rather than running into enemy bullets in the open. In the D-Day landings, the Canadians
maybe he mentioned the beaches.
landed on Juno Beach.
Juno Beach, okay, yeah. Where was the American? Were at the Umayan? Or, yeah, I heard about this, that they lost a lot of people.
The second most resisted beachhead besides Omaha. The Canadians penetrated further inland than anyone else, coming up against some of the strongest units in the German military. In Belgium and the Netherlands, the Canadians spent thousands and thousands of Canadian lives to drive the Germans back and get food to the starving civilian populations. They even shared rations with civilians and gave them blankets. Some of the most intense combat here was in the Battle of Scheldt, where the Allies fought through flooded terrain against stiff German defenses for about a month. This battle alone cost the Canadians more than 6,000 casualties. This latter triumph, particularly the part about getting food to the starving civilians, is certainly keeping with Canadian tendencies in the First World War, though the following atrocity paints a bit of a different picture. Canadian Lieutenant Colonel Frederick E. Wiggle was shot dead on approach to the town of Friseute, Germany, and a rumor spread that it was a civilian sniper from that town who shot him. Back on that revenge train, the Canadians burnt down the entire town, apparently moving its citizens onward before setting their homes on fire. It was discovered later that Wiggle was shot by German soldiers. Now, the intent of emphasizing Canadian brutality in World War I and mentioning the Friseute incident is not to take away from Canadian bravery in either world conflict. Like I said before, Canadians were some of the most well-trained and formidable.
I mean, I don't want to talk bad about anyone who was in this way brave to fight in the war. I just I mean, was terrible, and but I have still to be grateful for the Canadians, the British, the Americans, which fought against the Nazis in the Second World War. But we should also not think bad about, for example, Chamberlain, who tried before the war even broke out to his appeasement policy, which is often talked bad about or said that it was destined to fail, but it was the best thing that he could do, and we should see that also as a thing as it was the best thing that he could do. Chamberlain was trying to prevent the war from even happening. He failed, yeah. Or and the Nazis and Hitler, they, I mean, they didn't want to this appeasement. They wanted even more and more, and at some point, it was impossible to hold this anymore. But the attempts were the only thing that he could have done, which was good. So he did the only good thing that in his position he could do. He tried, and it failed, but the attempt still was completely great and worth it. I see the bravery. I would not go to war, even in a world war. I would not um fight for anyone far away in a different country, um even if it is completely inhumane what happens there, and I would not fight. I'm not a coward. I'm also a coward. I would not also not maybe do this when I would be in this way brave enough. But I also do think that um I don't want to participate in a war. I would further go into I think that many people far too easy say he was he should have declared war earlier to Germany. He should not accepted this. Why has he done this? Because because he in the end failed, and but still it was good that he did this. And but what I really want to say is that the soldiers from Canada and also from other countries which fought in the Second World War, they are in a certain way they are brave, and in a certain way it is also kind of a failure from everyone that it just comes to this, that the situation was there, and that all of this people had to die. Of course, Germany started the World War, of course. And who knows what would have happened if no one would have stopped Germany, of course. But we should, and probably no one is really disagreeing with me about this, try also in the present time to stop wars, and to not let wars become too disastrous. And you should also think about Ukraine in this situation. There is, of course, some people say we should, for example, send even more weapons and more weapons and more weapons, but we have always, and also about the war in Yemen, which is in some ways, I think, even more terrible than the war in Ukraine. We have to ask ourselves always, is there any alternative we can do to stop the war? And I don't have a wonderful best solution. I also don't know anything. I mean, I don't know everything. I know just a few things, and I cannot. I don't have the perfect solution, of course, except peace always. But that's far easier to say than to really do. But yeah, let's first continue with the video. I don't even know where I stopped the video and what happened before. So I don't think that the soldiers are all assholes, murderers, or idiots. And I don't want to talk what they did into a bad way. I mean, all soldiers are in a certain way murderers, but some are just forced into this. Some see no other option. Some think they do something good, and so that's a really difficult topic, and if you have other good videos which are about soldiers or about the war and in a not my English is not so good, but in not a glorifying way, which don't talk about the World War One or Two in a glorifying way, then recommend it to me in the comments. Let's continue with the video.
Soldiers on any front in any war. And I think the best way to communicate that is to share some stories involving some of the most heroic Canadian soldiers in World War II. On the 14th of December 1943, Canadian Captain Paul Triquet and his company, supported by an armoured squadron, tried to cross the gully and take the Casa Berardi, a hamlet on the Orto Orsona lateral, Italy. Under heavy machine gun and mortar fire, Triquet ran around organising and inspiring what remained of his men, saying, "There are enemy in front of us, behind us and on our flanks. There is only one safe place. That is on the objective," before charging forward and breaking through the enemy line. Triquet's company and the supporting tank squadron pushed right up to the edge of Casa Berardi, where he set up defenses and fought off a tank-supported German counterattack with whatever weapons he could find. He held the defensive parameter against superior numbers until the rest of the battalion came in and relieved the company. Triquet's utter disregard of danger, his cheerfulness and tireless devotion inspired his men, and his tactical skill and leadership facilitated the capture at a vital point on the Ortona Orsona lateral. On the 18th of August 1944, Canadian Major David Vivian Currie was in command of a force of tanks, self-propelled anti-tank guns and infantry. His task was to block an escape route from the Faceless pocket in the village of Solember-sur-Divers, Normandy. Currie went in alone to scout German defences and to free the crew of 2 Allied tanks which were previously disabled. Under heavy mortar...
what can a soldier, a commander, a captain, or whatsoever do if he is just surrounded by soldiers and which fire on him, or on his crowd, or on his men, or whatsoever? Of course, in the ideal world, they would all lay down their weapons and stop fighting. I would love this, of course. But the Germans are full of their own hate, and even if when they would all at first lay down their weapons, they could probably see that the other men are also just human beings which want to live a peaceful life. Maybe they would see this, and maybe then there would not be any battle, any more death. But it doesn't even come to the situation where they can try to talk and find out that everything is not worth it. The battle is not worth it. The war is not worth it. The atrocities are not worth it. It cannot even come to the situation because it's war, and they are all shooting and killing each other. So the war is just that there is a war is just it shows us that something really big has failed before. In a situation where the war takes place, you cannot do much except trying to survive and be as humane as possible. So but before the war even started, many things failed. Only through this it could even come to the war. It's my opinion. I'm a pacifist. I tried to find a way how the war could have been prevented. I tried to find a way how soldiers can just place down their weapons and shake hands, and everything is good. Also in Ukraine. Was? I'm not defending either side or saying either side is better than the other. Also for Ukraine, it just I try to find a way how war could end, and maybe I sometimes blame too easily one side, but I don't like I'm really disappointed in Russia that they did this. I mean, I understand many of their reasons, what they want and so on, but I'm disappointed in the methods, because, of course, NATO was very aggressive in the last years, and taking one country after the next country in throw they in a just they just promised with words, not with they didn't there was nothing written down in the contract or so. They promised, as far as I know, Russia, that they would not expand to the east, but they did. And why should the NATO exist in general? It's another question I ask myself. Why should NATO exist in general? NATO should have been ended or stopped or resolved, or I mean, they should have when also the Warsaw Pact was not anymore existing. They should also have done the same with NATO. So NATO should stop. Warsaw Pact should stop, and yeah. But the one thing stopped, the other things didn't stop. So NATO continued to exist. They created new purposes why they should exist, and the war against terror started then also with the attacks on 2001 on the World Trade Center and so on. So they found new reasons to exist in NATO, and then expanded to the east also. Of course, the United States has also interest in the area. They have interest in certain things. But still, as a pacifist, I am. And it's very weird, and I don't know any better word in the moment, but weird how media and many other people made it so that calling someone a pacifist in connection with being against weapons being sent to Ukraine, or being in favor of negotiations between Russia and Ukraine, certain people and in the media it made it seem like that pacifism or being a pacifist in this situation is not a good thing. But there is no better situation than in war times to be a pacifist. Being a pacifist while there is peace is nice and so on, but there's nothing behind it. There's no reason behind it. There's no use for being a pacifist when there is peace already. The same way you could argue that with a Firewatch, Feuerwehr in English, which take down burning buildings, but if there is no fire, there is also not any use for the Firewatch. The only real important time when pacifists are needed is when it is war. Anyway, I talked far too long about something also much different than the video, what the video is about. Let's continue.
Fire, he succeeded. The Germans then kept throwing counterattacks at Curry and his men until on the 20th, one final German counterattack was thwarted by Curry, costing the Germans some 2,900 casualties. Throughout these 3 days of intense combat, Curry displayed gallant conduct and a contempt of danger, and collected and inspired his men. One of his officers said, "We knew at one stage that it was going to be a fight to the finish. But he was so cool about it, it was impossible for us to get excited." Over the 3 days, Curry barely got an hour's sleep. And when it was over, he fell asleep standing and then crashed to the ground. Curie's courage and devotion to duty had a far-reaching effect on the successful outcome of the battle. French-Canadian Corporal Leo Major was also in Normandy, where he captured a German armoured vehicle which held secret codes and lost an eye to a phosphorus grenade. He stayed in service, saying that he looked like a pirate. However, it wasn't in Normandy where Leo earned his first Distinguished Conduct Medal, but in the Netherlands in 1945. Actually, before we go there, Leo single-handedly captured 93 Germans in the Battle of Scheldt. When out on a solo reconnaissance mission in 1944, he escorted all 93 of them back to his camp, where he would not accept a DCM because he considered the person awarding it to him to be incompetent. Back to 1945 and the real DCM. After breaking his back, ribs, and both ankles when the car he was in was hit by a landmine, Leo went on a recon mission with a friend in the city of Zwolle.
At least he didn't kill the 93 people. That's great.
His friend was killed, so Major continued alone, capturing a German soldier, making the soldier take him to his officer, who was in a bar, and then telling that German officer that the Canadian artillery was going to shell and kill them all. Leo then ran through the city, firing his gun and lobbing grenades, fooling the Germans into thinking the Canadian army was invading. All through the night, Major brought captured German troops back to his camp, resting in civilian houses whenever he needed to catch his breath. He then set a Gestapo HQ on fire and assaulted a Nazi SS HQ before meeting with members of the Dutch resistance and informing them that he had liberated the entire city by himself. I've got to say, that last one is pure insanity.
It is insane, of course, but it's great. I mean, just because something cruel is done to you as a soldier, or you see something cruel happening, it should not make you in doing a similar cruel thing. So I know many people died when the Soviet army came to the east and then raped and killed many people. But you have to take into account, and this doesn't justify what happened, that the Germans did the same thing. And there you see the bad side of war. I mean, what I meant. You see what I meant. The Soviets did it wrong in this way. I mean, I think everyone with can understand this, or at least should understand this, that terrible things would have been done to you, but then the Soviets, or in the probably not always, but often have had done it back. So it is a similar thing that if someone hits you, you should not hit back. It is kind of philosophy, and if you see something cruel happening, then you should not act in revenge. So that's what I wanted to say, which the Soviets did. But anyway, let's continue with this video.
What an absolute machine. Overall, based on the available evidence at least, I think Canadians in World War II abandoned their unofficial take no prisoner and kill the wounded policies of World War I. Obviously, this is a generalization, and the Frieseuter incident certainly demonstrates that they were at least capable of unjust violence, though there is no comparing the deeds of the Canadians to, say, the Germans, the Japanese, and the Soviets. As evinced by the stories of Paul Triqueur, David Curie, and Leo Major, Canadian courage and formidability was in no short supply, and I believe modern-day Canadians should be proud of how the Canadian military cleaned up their act after World War I and made such a brave and significant contribution to an Allied victory in...
I don't compare anyone from the soldiers. All the soldiers which came to, or which kind of freed Germany from the Nazis, I have to respect in some way. Whether they know also like violent and cruel or not. And of course also probably British, Canadian, maybe even other, I mean, not just Soviets did war crimes in Germany, probably also others. But I have to be grateful and thankful to all of them. Because I don't know in what kind of Germany I would have grown up if they would not have done this.
In the Second World War. Anyways guys, make sure you let me know your thoughts on Canada and some of the super soldiers we mentioned in the last bit of this video in the comments section below. And just before you go guys, make sure you check out some of the links in the description below.
I'm convinced enough to subscribe and like the video. I mean, I don't think that this guy and the channel and from this video, I have just watched this one video. I have not the feeling that it's kind of a glorifying war channel. Also, it's just to show what happened and to show that war is terrible and yeah. So I'm please also subscribe for him. Subscribe for me too. Like this video too, and maybe even my video. It is now a very long video. It's more than 3 times as long as the original video. And I hope you I didn't bore it was not too boring to watch this reaction, and I hope I made some of my points clear that I as a pacifist have. I'm against any war all over the world. And yeah, I just recently watched a video about the war in Yemen, which is ongoing, a civil war between many different countries and or organizations or groups. But the main thing which shocked me the most was not the war itself, which is of course terrible, but the effect it had on the civil population through the, I think mainly through the blockade from the Saudi led intervention thing. I'm not sure what the name, but that they blocked the country and don't let anything except sometimes I think medical stuff and maybe sometimes maybe even food, but far too less food through, and people are starving there. Many million people are starving or about to starve. It's not very good covered through the media, the war in Yemen. It's mostly just Ukraine in the recent weeks and months. But yeah, there are also other conflicts where other people die in the world right now. Sadly, after World War I and II, they didn't stop with wars. Wars are still ongoing and happening. For example, in Ukraine, in Yemen, in Somalia, there are also it's not a real war; it's a civil war. Also, well, in Yemen, it's also a civil war. But in Mali, I think it's also a civil war. Ethiopia, also, in many countries, and violence is also in much more countries. So let's try to reach world peace at some point in history.